Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Max Verstappen won the driver's title in 2024. That does not necessarily mean that he's the heavy favourite going into the new season. Helmut Marko confirms that Red Bull still don't fully understand exactly the way their car is performing, and when you're designing the RB21, that is a major problem indeed, with McLaren, Mercedes and certainly Ferrari gearing up for a title challenge next year. Will Max Verstappen simply not have the machinery to maintain his victories in 25? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, the Pirelli tyre tested in Abu Dhabi yesterday. The C6 compound was a big talking point. Of course, we have C1 to C5. C6 would be a step even softer than that. They were testing a C6 compound yesterday. The conclusion is it doesn't really work as they wanted it to. It's good for like half a lap and then it just gives up on you. So we may or may not see the C6 next year. This was interesting just because there were rumours yesterday on the fact that Carlos Sainz did a 1:23.6, which was a couple of tenths faster than what Albon did in qualifying a couple of days ago. Now, I thought, and there were talks, that maybe that was done on the C6, even a step softer and therefore more grippier than the C5, but actually no, that was also done on the C5. Now, it's tough to have really any takeaways from this just because it's different track conditions, more rubber on the track presumably in the test than there was in qualifying, so, tough to say. But same car, different driver, same compounds. It's not comparable, but it's interesting. People are going to talk about it, obviously, because there is a big discussion on how Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon are going to get on against each other next year. Bit of drama on this as well. I don't know if you guys think there was anything calculated in this, but Scuderia Ferrari confirmed yesterday they will be supplying Cadillac Formula 1 team with their power unit and gearbox from 2026 into the future. Now, in their announcement here on Twitter, they didn't mention Andretti by name at all, which effectively toes the line of Formula 1, who refused to even acknowledge that Andretti apparently exist. So kind of still unclear as to whether Michael Andretti was really that problematic. But they're happy with Cadillac, they're happy with General Motors, and also TWG Global, which is kind of Andretti but not in name. Now, interestingly enough, they did an announcement yesterday where they mentioned Andretti, and then they did like another one where they didn't mention Andretti at all and they just mentioned Cadillac. So it's all kind of confusing. However, it will be noted that the Andretti announcement is still up on the website. So I'm not really sure if there's anything in this at all. It's just one of these, Ferrari may have their opinion, Formula 1 may have their opinion. There's just a bit of kind of speculation that maybe Ferrari have done this kind of, not out of spite precisely, but Formula 1 will refuse to even mention Andretti by name, whereas Ferrari say Andretti Formula Racing LLC, and they mention it again a couple of times actually. Ferrari have also commented on this too, because obviously they get paid by Cadillac for giving them the engines, but also it gives them some advantage in terms of reliability, because the more engines that you have in the pool and you can sell to others, the more engines you can test and obviously learn a bit more. So Vasseur is actually very happy to supply another team with engines. Of course, it's going to be Haas as well. Alfa Romeo, obviously with Sauber, they're Ferrari, but they will be Audi from 2026. So it's good for Ferrari, certainly for the new power units, to have another team they can supply. And as Vasseur says, supplying to Cadillac is also a technical advantage for Ferrari. So there's benefits to be gained here on both sides. Alpine, we know they are buying the Mercedes engines, which is kind of remarkable in 2026. They have made a rather remarkable turnaround in the second half of the season, certainly with Pierre Gasly. Alpine getting 6th in the Constructors seemed rather implausible not that long ago. But yeah, they're slow and overweight and rather ugly car, to be honest, at the start of the season. That was turned around, and they actually had a rather competitive piece of machinery. Now, this man at the centre here, of course, is Flavio Briatore. This is the Alpine team, Gasly and Doohan, as it was at Abu Dhabi, and that will be, of course, their lineup next year as well. Now, Briatore must be feeling kind of smug about the progress that they have made, but obviously their engine, despite not being good, they've clearly put together a decent chassis in the second half of the season here. The Alpine organisation, and it seems like Flavio Briatore, we know he's a good talker, right, and, good at some other things, and if you want to win a race, Briatore will find a way to get it done by hook or by crook. But he apparently promised Luca De Meo that he would make Alpine a winning team in 3 years. This was the original quote. "It's the result of everyone, and I want to congratulate with everyone really, because it's the team spirit. This is what I want. I promised to Luca De Meo, the CEO, to put a winning team in 3 years." Or whatever. So I don't really know what that final couple of words mean, but it seems like, ladies and gentlemen, we have another 100 race plan from Alpine. I guess it's like a 72 race plan or whatever, given it's going to be 3 seasons, seems to be the plan. But yeah, Alpine became very, very strong at the end of the season, and Briatore is like, look, I'm making progress. Now, is that going to be enough as their like chief advisor now to make them a winning team? That is far easier said than done. But as I say, if, you know, maybe Briatore can make the team a winning team in 3 weeks if he was to call in, you know, let's say Nelson Piquet Jr., bring him back into the lineup, that would be rather helpful. Crashgate 2008 Singapore, if you are not aware. But yeah, are Alpine really going to make that much progress? I don't know. This is the way the championship ended. Of course, they were 6th last year. They were 6th this year with 2 podiums apiece. Last year, they had 2 rather remarkable podiums. This year, they had 1 at Brazil with both of their drivers. But of course, it was McLaren with the championship. They only had 6 race wins, McLaren, which is quite remarkable when you look at it, because Red Bull had 9 race wins, 18 podiums. They had 6, McLaren, and won the championship. That is the fewest number of race wins by a Constructors champion since 1999, I believe, when it was Ferrari who won the championship, I think, that year. And obviously back then there were far fewer races. So, you know, this side of the millennia, we've never seen anything like this. And it goes to show that Red Bull obviously had Perez, which didn't help, despite having a great car. But equally, the level of competition among the top 4 teams was at times very strong indeed, which led to a result like this. And also that McLaren didn't maybe execute as they could or should have done. And yeah, they go away as champions, but with the fewest Grand Prix wins in the last 25 years to win a championship. The big question now the season is over is, what does this mean for next year? They had the strongest car for a large part of the season. Some weekends the Ferrari was good, if not better. Some weekends the Red Bull was there. Some weekends the Mercedes was somehow a rocket ship. Next season, what does that mean? Are McLaren the favourites for next year's Constructors? Probably, you might well say yes on current evidence. Where a Ferrari in that picture, can you possibly look past Max Verstappen? He's won it for the last 4 years in a row. He's not going to get challenged by any teammate that's in that seat based on the names that we're hearing potentially going to that seat. So what are the options for Red Bull to maybe win next year's championship? And what are Max's chances? These are some of the key questions currently going around. Now, Williams, they are looking forward to 2026. It's funny how Williams operate, because I swear every single year we hear this. It's like, yeah, this year we're sacrificing the car to focus on next year. But to be fair, would Albon and Sainz agree with this perspective? Probably yes. The intention for Valtteri is to try and take Williams back to the top, and they're not going to achieve that next year. So why not look forward to 2026, which is fair enough. But obviously other teams will also be doing a similar thing. But let's talk about how Red Bull are likely to fare next year, because the way they ended the season is not the way that they would have liked to. Sergio Perez was so far behind his teammate in terms of the Constructors' Championship. It's almost outrageous. There's actually an interesting number I'll share for you guys here. So Perez had a 285 point gap to his teammate Max Verstappen. The rest of the grid combines their gaps with respect to their teammates was 275. Now, obviously, as you get lower and lower down the grid, that number's going to be smaller because there are fewer points on display, but still, this is quite impressive, like, you know, impressively bad from the Perez side of the garage. So, yes, Perez underperformance obviously affected them, but so did the respective performance of the car. Yuki was driving the car. He said it suits his style. I haven't struggled much to adapt. Long runs have been able to run consistently and feel the limitations of the car. Now, of course, Yuki is going to say that. Do I believe he'd do a better job than Perez or a better job than really any of the other options they're considering? I do believe so. Would he be able to match or challenge Verstappen? Really, I'm not so convinced personally. I think there are very few drivers that actually could. So Max will still be winning out of the Red Bull camp next year, and he won this year out of the 2 Red Bull drivers, and he won so emphatically that he was able to win the championship in the process. The question, of course, really comes down to whether that's achievable again next year if the car starts off with the same degree of competitiveness that it ended this season with. One benefit is that they dropped down in terms of aero testing numbers. So by being third now in the Constructors, they have a higher number of wind tunnel runs and their CFD items that they can use compared to McLaren, compared to Ferrari, the best teams on the grid, at least in terms of Constructors results. And that will help them, certainly going into 2026. I think that's going to be a good help for Red Bull. But for next year, it's probably not going to make that much difference, all things considered, especially when they seem to still have a fundamental flaw in their whole concept. Because we've seen this a few times now. Because Verstappen was the champion anyway, it wasn't massively discussed. But it's still been a very regular feature for Red Bull where Max or even Perez will be there, they'll be in the mix, they'll be in the fight, and then seemingly out of nowhere the car falls out of the operating window and all of a sudden it's pretty bad. I mean, at least, you know, with respect to the top cars. We saw it in Monza and other circuits around that time as well, but even in recent races we've seen a similar thing. Yes, Qatar, the main race, was excellent for Max and he won pretty comfortably, and his qualifying was excellent of course there as well. He ended up second after the Russell fiasco, but in the sprint race on the Saturday, Verstappen was nowhere. He couldn't overtake a Haas for the entire Grand Prix. So this is the debate really on the Red Bull car, is that it seems to have a very marginal window where it's excellent, and if it falls slightly out of that, whether that be temperature related or some small setup things dependent on the circuit, and of course tyres, as are always important in Formula 1, then this RB20 simply doesn't really perform. And we can see it flip-flop even lap to lap sometimes. In Abu Dhabi, for example, it was kind of nowhere all weekends. They turned up to qualifying. Max looked like he was going to be fast enough to stick it on pole, but then his final run just wasn't quick enough in the end. And he just, you know, the tyres weren't there and he couldn't improve for whatever reason. And then the Grand Prix starts. Sure, he has the, you know, the impact with Piastri on the first lap, but even then, once he recovered, the race pace wasn't really there either. So Red Bull, like Mercedes really, seem to have a problem with understanding why their car does and does not perform. And we see Helmut Marko made this very clear over the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix weekend, saying the following: if McLaren can take this form into next year and we don't improve, then it will be even tighter than it is today. Presumably he means in the drivers, just because, you know, the constructors, they already lost. It's not a completely new start because the regulations are stable, but our weaknesses are still that. We get to the track and the correlation between all the simulations, the wind tunnel and reality just doesn't work. And the car is in a much too narrow window in which it works. Our technical group has a lot of work to do. Now, that's quite the statement to make when, you know, the season's ended, the work on next year's development has already begun, and yet Marko's been quite clear that his team has, you know, a lot of things they've got to do and learn and accomplish if they want to actually make the progress that they're looking to make for next year. So it is concerning that while Red Bull did make progress towards the end of the year, they managed to find setups where Verstappen could deliver, as in Qatar, as in Brazil. The majority of the time, they were kind of in no man's land, and Max just had to wrestle every single point that the car was capable of on the weekends. And that was good enough for him to win the championship. But that won't be good enough if he doesn't have a substantial advantage at the start of next season, right? Because from the summer break to now, Max Verstappen was the third highest scoring driver, I think behind Leclerc and then behind Norris. So that's not going to work if next year starts the same way that this year ended. So Red Bull know they've got a lot of work to do, and it's not something that's easily solved. This correlation problem, it's like, well, you've had all the Grand Prix, and if you've not fixed it in the last like 15 races going into the final few and the problem is still there, you know, is there any confidence that Red Bull will solve it, especially now Newey is gone? I think they're a serious concern to Red Bull. But of course, then again, because their car was great at the start of the season, I'm sure they were able to commit some additional resources to, especially because they probably knew Max was going to win the championship anyway, to next year rather than this year, but it's still not so clear. And if you look at the results, going from Austria and beyond, you know, seconds. Obviously in Hungary was not a good weekend, ended up fifth, lots of drama that weekend. And yeah, Max not winning for many a race in a row. Then he wins in Sao Paulo, then he wins in Qatar, but even Abu Dhabi was kind of nowhere to close out the season as well. So yeah, incredibly confusing at times, this Red Bull. Of course, we've talked about multiple rumours and reasons why their car just switched off, it seems, going into Miami and potentially beyond. And a few of those rounds, very much arguably, Norris should or could have won. But this start of the season is not expected to be seen again for Verstappen next year. And if it's not, then it's tough to argue that he's the favourite. But yeah, it's still a big debate for me, because I'm not sure I know where McLaren or Ferrari are going to be next year, but I do know that Max is probably going to be maximising whatever the Red Bull is capable of weekend in, weekend out. That's not something that, I'm sure that Lando can do as of yet. I'm very confident in the driver lineup at Ferrari, but of course they also may very well take points off each other, Leclerc and Hamilton, and it's also tough to say how good that car is actually going to be. Rosberg reckons that Lando is the favourite for next year. I'm not so convinced yet. I still kind of want to say Max is the favourite, just because he's won it for the last 4 times in a row. But I do, see the argument that the Red Bull has been very inconsistent since the halfway point of the season and even before, and Red Bull are still themselves saying they don't really know what to do about it, which is a concern when the start of the season is like 90 days away, which seems like quite a long time away, which it is. But, building a car is not an easy thing to do. So tweet your thoughts in the comments below. Of course, McLaren also have the lineup to some degree, although I think Piastri does have to step up in some regard, as does Norris, if they want to win it again, because, as I say, they quite comfortably, McLaren had the fastest car on average for a significant part of the season, and they won, 6 races, which, realistically, that's a quarter of the Grand Prix. They had the fastest car for far more than a quarter of the Grand Prix, so I think that's something that they will need to be focused on, but of course, they're happy winning the championship for the first time, of course, for them since 1998, and, it also is notable, right, that the last time, this is one of those stats that might not mean anything, but the last time that McLaren won the championship, the Constructors, the next 6 years were all won by Ferrari, 99 all the way to 2004. So maybe there's an argument that the boys at Maranello are watching this and rather excited about the possibility of maybe that happening again with some sort of dream team getting formed, I suppose. One good news for Max Verstappen is he's not going to get punished for that stupid idiot's comment that he made on the radio, apparently. So the FIA have decided, all right, you know what, enough's enough this season, Max. We'll see you in the new year type thing. And also these numbers, I don't know exactly whether these bonus numbers are exactly true, but this was going around, so I thought I'd mention it for you guys, on the salaries of the drivers and their respective bonuses. It seems like Max gets a $15 million bonus by winning the championship, and obviously different teams are going to design it in different ways. Norris, though, got a $23 million bonus, apparently the highest of anyone on here. Piastri got $17 million, so it seems like there were big bonuses for the drivers winning the Constructors, and then obviously something nice in addition as well for the Drivers' Championship placings. There was another big bonus for, I guess, Leclerc with 12 mil. I wonder what Leclerc's would have been had he got second in the Drivers' Championship, or if they'd have won the Constructors. That might have been a big deal as well. But these are your drivers in order. Hamilton next year might be back at the top of this list because of what Ferrari are going to be paying him. But very much on Twitter, your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.